Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about understanding strength development. And when I make these statements, I have literally taken clients using these sort of methods and taken them all the way up to very elite levels. Elite levels meaning, over 600-pound squats with no wraps. The 700-pound deadlift range. So when I say that, that is the sort of strength we're talking about. Same thing, bench presses up over 400 pounds. Keeping in mind, these are not fat lifters. So when I make that statement, I'm not talking about 300-pound fat guys either. I'm talking about guys well under 300 pounds. Now, obviously, they're all over 200, but not always by much. So this idea that we need all this periodization is not necessarily true. And keep in mind, a lot of the periodization that's out there is done, how do I put this, to impress people with the knowledge of the coach. But it is largely voodoo. Most of it's voodoo. And a lot of it is simply there to keep the lifter busy and distracted and seeing some progression on certain movements while they get you bigger. And we need to again be clear there. All right? For strength development, we only need to do singles. So in other words, on the neuromuscular end, quite frankly, if your goal is to get really strong at a 1 rep max, which is usually how we define strength, training maxes will do that. And anything around 90% will do that. And I'm sorry, people who are like, no, you have to go. No, not necessarily. And rep work doesn't improve max strength better than singles does. Why? Because you're practicing doing a single. Okay? And I would go so far as to say that you can consistently do singles at around the 90% range with perfect form and perfect bar speed and not get beat up. Okay? Not get beat up. And I do understand when you've seen Dave Tate and other people point out that, it is about the straining, but that's if you're going to do true max effort. But notice that everyone who has you do true max effort, they rotate lifts. And that's done to keep the injury rates lower and to make sure that your neural drive isn't high, right? They're making sure that you're not efficient at those movements, so you haven't practiced that exact pattern. Okay, because if you start doing that on the same exercises, we start running into problems. You don't want to do a true 1 rep max on a movement that you're used to doing, such as your traditional classic lifts. It's when we start getting hurt, we start getting beat up, we start getting overuse, right? Start getting burnout. It's problematic. But 90% we can do all the time. And people need to understand. They need to understand this. It will carry over. You do not have to get used to handling a weight to lift it. All right, that is complete nonsense. Oh, I do this overload training so I get used to holding 350 pounds in my hands. Yeah, that's not necessary. That has never been necessary. I don't even think it's beneficial. It's purely people psychologically preparing, but it doesn't actually do anything to make you stronger. And if you're strong enough, you're going to lift it anyways. Okay? Singles are what produce it, and they don't have to be taken to a max. 90% will recruit the same motor units. Okay? As long as you move the weight fast and push hard. Okay? That's it. That will handle it. And so when that comes over to it, people go, well, do we need progression? No, you don't need progression. You don't need programming at all for that. If your goal is to lift a certain amount of weight, at a certain time, that you're getting stronger and able to do it, lift 90% of that weight. Like if you're like, okay, I know that I'm probably getting close to strong enough to lift 500 pounds on this lift at a competition. All right, come in and do 450. As long as the 450 feels like not a true max, you're good. You'll last longer. And everything else outside of that from strength, quite frankly, is just gaining muscle mass. Gaining muscle in the appropriate places. Gaining muscle mass overall. Now, if you're in a weight class, improved body composition is the best thing you could do. So how do we gain muscle? We know how to gain muscle. Has gaining muscle ever required hypertrophy? And the same thing, you start talking field athletes who don't necessarily need to do a 1 rep max. I've definitely seen some great coaches point out it doesn't matter how you get a lifter strong enough to squat 500 pounds. Doesn't matter whether they did triples with 450. It doesn't matter if they did 10 rep sets. If they've built the same amount of muscle, you're not going to see a difference on the playing field. In other words, as long as the musculature and the overall strength is the same, you're not going to see a performance difference out on the playing field, a football field, a rugby field, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's the muscle mass and the ability to produce the force through that muscle that's carrying over out there. Obviously, their sport-specific training is more important. Okay, sport-specific training is more important. But if you have the lifters who you've all tested and they're capable of squatting 500 pounds, irrespective of whether they use 10s or 3s to get there, performance is going to be the same. So what do we do outside of that? We gain muscle, and we know how to gain muscle. We know how to do hypertrophy training. 10 to 20 sets a week per muscle group, preferably done, with moderately higher reps. But I don't care if you used anything between the 5 and the 20 rep range to build it. At the end of the day, as long as they get bigger, if we maximize hypertrophy, strength potential goes up, and that's talking strength potential on a playing field. Well, it's the same thing when we talk about your 1 rep maxes. But coaches can talk all day long about we did this 3x3 or this 5x. Doesn't matter, because what's really going to make you strong is getting bigger. Hypertrophy, 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 and you should be doing it year round. Because if we come over to that point, if we know size equals strength potential, you better not have weeks other than maybe right before you compete to where you're not maximizing hypertrophy. You need to be doing it all the time. And then if you need maximum strength to go up, heavy singles at 90% will absolutely do that all day long. Okay? And I mean, coaching goes beyond that. Some people say, well, how could you give that information for free and still expect to get coaching clients then? Because there's a lot of nuance to coaching and keeping people dialed in and keeping their head straight, keeping their technique correct, giving them the exercises that's going to balance everything for them. You'll always have people who need your services. And the same thing, accountability mindset of results. It's all a factor. Okay? Every single time. But again, people have made the idea of maximizing strength way more complicated than it needs to be. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.